Dr. Joe was a kind and skilled doctor. Everyone who came to his hospital left feeling better. He had a special way of treating his patients, not just with medicine, but with love and care. No matter how sick a person was, he always smiled at them, spoke gently, and even played with the little children. He believed that kindness could heal just as much as medicine. Because of his good heart, people loved coming to his hospital. They knew they would be treated with respect, not just as patients, but as human beings. Some even traveled from far just to see him. But despite all this, Dr. Joe was not a rich man. One night, he sat alone in his small house, deep in thought. The room was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. He had worked for many years, saving lives and helping people, yet he was still struggling to survive. His hospital was not big, and he often treated poor people who could not afford to pay him much. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Why is life so unfair?" he muttered to himself. "I have spent years doing good, yet I have nothing to show for it. I see other doctors driving big cars, living in fine houses, and enjoying life. But me? I can barely pay my bills." Dr. Joe knew why he was still poor. He had refused to take part in the shady deals that some doctors did to make fast money. Many times, he had been approached with offers, big money deals that could have made him a millionaire. Some doctors offered him money to perform illegal abortions for young girls who didn't want their babies. Others tried to convince him to remove organs from dying patients and sell them to the highest bidder. They told him it was a smart way to make money. After all, the patients were going to die anyway. But Dr. Joe always refused. He couldn't bring himself to do such evil things. "I became a doctor to save lives, not to destroy them," he always told himself. Now, as he sat in his lonely house, he wondered if he had made the right decision. "If I had agreed to those deals, I would be a billionaire by now," he thought bitterly. "I could have owned the biggest hospital in the city. I could have had a beautiful mansion, a fleet of cars, and traveled the world. But instead, I am here, struggling to survive." His heart felt heavy. He was a good man, but who did doing good ever help? With a deep sigh, he looked up at the ceiling. "God, please help me," he whispered. "Your son needs help." As he closed his eyes, a single tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would never sell his soul for money. Little did he know that something was about to happen that would change his life forever. One afternoon, as Dr. Joe sat in his office, lost in thought, a well-dressed man walked in. The man looked powerful and confident, the kind of person who always got what he wanted. He took a seat across from Joe and smiled. "Dr. Joe," he began, "I have a business proposal for you. I have been watching you for a long time, and I know you are the right person for this deal. If you agree, you will become a billionaire in no time." Joe raised his eyebrows. "A billionaire?" he asked, suddenly interested. "Yes," the man said, leaning forward. "It's very simple. All you have to do is harvest kidneys from your patients during surgery and deliver them to us. You don't have to worry about anything. We will handle the rest. The patients won't even know. You will still treat them well, and they will walk out of your hospital feeling fine. But we get what we need, and you get rich." Joe's heart pounded. He had always rejected shady deals, but this one was different. The man made it sound so easy, almost harmless. Before Joe could even respond, the man pulled out his phone and made a quick transfer. A few seconds later, Joe's phone beeped. He checked his bank account and gasped. His balance had skyrocketed. He had never seen so much money in his life. His hands trembled as he looked at the figure on the screen. It was more money than he had ever earned in years of hard work. "So, Dr. Joe," the man said with a sly smile, "do we have a deal?" Joe hesitated. A voice in his head screamed at him to reject the offer, but the money was too tempting. He had suffered for too long, doing good and getting nothing in return. Maybe this was his chance to finally live the life he had always dreamed of. Taking a deep breath, Joe nodded. "We have a deal," he said. From that day on, Dr. Joe changed. He still smiled at his patients, still played with the children, and still treated everyone with kindness. But behind that gentle smile, he was a different man. Whenever he performed surgery, he would carefully remove one kidney from his patients, just as the man had instructed. The patients never suspected a thing. They left his hospital feeling better, not knowing that they had lost something valuable inside them. And in return, Joe was paid handsomely. With every kidney he delivered, his bank account grew. Soon, he was making so much money that he didn't know what to do with it. He bought a luxurious mansion in the most expensive part of the city. He filled his garage with expensive cars, Mercedes, Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, and Ferrari. He traveled to exotic places, stayed in 5-star hotels, and ate the finest meals. People who once ignored him now treated him with great respect. They called him Dr. Joe, the billionaire. Young doctors wanted to work for him, and women admired him. He felt powerful, important, and untouchable. Joe convinced himself that he wasn't doing anything wrong. After all, his patients were still alive, and they didn't even know they were missing a kidney. He told himself that they could still live normal lives with just one kidney. He ignored the guilt that tried to creep into his heart. One night, as he stood on the balcony of his mansion, sipping a glass of expensive wine, he looked up at the sky and smiled. Finally, he whispered, "I have arrived." He had spent years struggling, doing good with nothing to show for it. But now, he was one of the richest men in the city. Little did he know that his past was about to catch up with him. Dr. Joe had become an expert in his dark business. By now, he had harvested countless kidneys from his patients, and none of them had ever found out. He was careful, precise, and secretive. One of the most important rules he set for himself was that no one, not even his nurses, was allowed to be present when he performed certain surgeries. If anyone questioned him, he would simply say, "Some procedures require absolute concentration. I don't want any distractions." His nurses respected his decision, but one of them, Nurse David, found it strange. Why was Joe always performing certain surgeries alone? What was he hiding? One evening, curiosity got the best of Nurse David. As Dr. Joe was inside the operating room working on a patient, David sneaked quietly to the door and peeped through the small glass window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dr. Joe was standing over the unconscious patient, holding a freshly removed kidney in his gloved hands. He carefully placed it in a sterile container, sealed it, and set it aside. David's heart pounded. So this was his secret. Dr. Joe, the once respected and beloved doctor, had been stealing organs from his patients all along. Without thinking, David pushed the door open and shouted, "Dr. Joe is stealing organs. He's harvesting kidneys from his patients." His voice echoed through the hospital halls. Nurses, doctors, and even some visitors rushed to the scene. They burst into the operating room and found Joe frozen in place, his hands still bloody, his face pale. There was no way out. The room filled with gasps and horrified whispers as the people realized the truth. The once trusted doctor had betrayed them all. Joe dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Please, forgive me. I didn't mean to do this. I was just desperate for money," he cried. But the crowd was not moved. Rage boiled inside them. "You are a monster. How many innocent lives have you destroyed?" someone shouted. Before long, the police arrived. They handcuffed Joe and led him out of the hospital as the crowd watched in shock and disgust. Some people spat at him, others shook their heads in disappointment. Joe, once a respected doctor, was now nothing but a criminal. The fall of Dr. Joe. The case moved quickly. Investigators uncovered evidence of Joe's crimes. Bank records, messages, and testimonies from other doctors involved in the illegal organ trade. His mansions, luxury cars, and all his wealth were seized. His hospital was shut down. Joe was taken to court, where his crimes were exposed to the entire world. People who once admired him now looked at him with shame and hatred. The judge wasted no time in passing the sentence. "Dr. Joe, for your crimes against innocent lives, you are sentenced to life in prison." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Joe collapsed to the ground, sobbing. "Please give me another chance. I don't want to die in prison," he begged. But it was too late. Joe was taken to a maximum security prison, where he spent his days in regret. The once powerful billionaire was now just another prisoner, dressed in a dull uniform, eating prison food, and sleeping on a cold, hard bed. At night, he couldn't sleep. The cries of the people he had betrayed haunted him. He remembered the innocent patients who trusted him, never knowing he had stolen a part of them. He remembered the smiling children who once played with him at the hospital. Now he was alone, abandoned and forgotten. He often sat in his prison cell, staring at the walls, whispering, "If only I had stayed true to my good heart. If only I had not let greed control me." But regrets could not change the past. Joe had lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and his soul. Moral lessons 1. Greed leads to destruction. No matter how tempting fast money is, it always comes with consequences. 2. Good things take time. Joe was once a good doctor, but he became impatient and let greed ruin him. 3. Honesty and integrity are more valuable than wealth. In the end, Joe's riches couldn't save him. 4. The truth will always come out. No matter how well you hide your wrongdoings, they will eventually be exposed. Thank you, dear viewers. Thank you for watching and listening to this story. I hope you learned something valuable from Dr. Joe's rise and fall. Remember, no matter how hard life gets, never trade your morals for money. Stay honest, stay true, and success will come in the right way. See you in the next story.